Shalom. Welcome to Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman. My guest, I'm joined in the studio today by Mark Finkelstein, and our guest later on in the show is Richard Miniter, author of Eyes on Target, among other books. And when Richard Miniter comes on, we have all kinds of topics to talk to him about. Particularly terrorism, general U.S. foreign policy, but particularly as it relates to North Africa. And there's a lot of current events discussion going on with that, particularly about the situation in Benghazi. So we look forward to talking to Richard Miniter about that. But first, World in 5 minutes. So there are many things that are going on this week. We have just come through both Holocaust remembrance celebrations and memorials and Israel independence celebrations and memorials. There was just USC's Shoah Foundation held an event the other day. The president spoke, and he said, "It's up to us to speak out against rhetoric that threatens the existence of a Jewish homeland and to sustain America's unshakable commitment to Israel's security," among other things. He also talked about the fact that the world is not a nice place right now, and there are many things that are going on. It's very dangerous. What's interesting is that there was also an article today that I saw online about Vladimir Putin of Russia talking about rising Nazism or Nazi sympathies, Nazi-based ideologies in Europe among European nationalists. And Russia is particularly concerned because a lot of these groups are essentially speaking out against what the Soviet Union had done, and comparing Russia with the Soviet Union. And the history of this kind of dialogue has always brought Jews into the conflict, Jews into the discussion, that the Nazis believed that the Soviet Union was significantly driven by a Jewish agenda, and many of the neo-Nazi groups and the rising nationalist Nazi groups in Europe continue to connect the Jews to that communist socialist agenda, and it's a very dangerous situation for the Jews. Not to mention the actual dangerous situation for the Jews that's going on, as opposed to a theoretical one, in the Ukraine, where Jews are afraid of the consequences of a Russian invasion of Ukraine, and there have been plans put into place, evidently, to evacuate Jewish communities in certain places there should the Russians invade and things become more dire. So the situation in Eastern Europe right now, while relatively stable in theory at the moment, could change fairly radically, and we need to be concerned about that. On the peace process front, the United States is still trying to say the only way forward is a negotiation between the two sides, that only a settlement during the negotiations will help. And the Palestinians keep trying to improve their negotiating position at best, or to achieve some of the things that they want to achieve ultimately by avoiding negotiations and going to international institutions. One of the concerns, one of the things that they've put forward over time is that they would go to the International Criminal Court and they would press charges against Israel for war crimes violations under the court. Jose Maria Ocampo spoke the other day. He's a former judge in the International Criminal Court, and he said that the Palestinians better be very leery of doing that and very, very careful of doing that, because the laws would apply to them as well. They couldn't just charge Israel for things. So that, for example, every single rocket that's fired by Hamas out of Gaza is a war crimes violation, every single one of them. Every single attempt to kidnap soldiers across the border, every attack, every single terrorist attack against Israeli civilians is a war crime. So the Palestinians would be responsible for all of those. And this would obviously become a very difficult situation They could not at one hand go and press charges against Israel for something that may or may not be a war crime. And there's questions of whether or not settlements and some of the other things that they would like to argue are war crimes are even war crimes. Whereas some of the things that they definitely have done on the Palestinian side for sure are war crimes. And so they're being cautioned about that. The likelihood is that the international organizations are not a way to really achieve much leverage, much less anything else, although they do give them the ability to try to delegitimize Israel. The problem is that when your existence at the moment is based on Israel, it becomes very difficult to put pressure on Israel like that. There are a lot of other things that are going on in the world right now, many of which I would like to discuss with Richard Miniter. So we're going to take a short break here. When we come back, hopefully Richard Miniter will join us, and either right away or just within a few minutes. And we will be right back on Rabbi Kaufman's Understanding the World.